My name is Lori Day. I'm a commissioner on Florida Commission on the Status of Women, and I am just delighted to welcome you to this great conversation that we're going to have. And I can't wait to tell you about this the special feature we're going to have today, and to help us really understand not only issues for women, but particularly as COVID has shaped the last year and what the future may hold. And to be able to put this into perspective, I'm delighted to introduce you to Misty Hegenes. She is a principal economist and a senior advisor for evaluation and experiences at the U.S. Census Bureau. And a couple of things to know about Misty is that she has a PhD from the University of Minnesota, and she's worked as a research economist in the United States federal government since 2010. She's held positions at the National Institute of Health and the U.S. Department of Labor, and she teaches a course on policy analysis and evaluation at the University of Maryland. Her research really focuses in some very interesting areas, specifically the dynamics of highly skilled scientific workforce, the improvement to measures of poverty and inequality, and gender economics. As part of her research, you will enjoy reading several of her opinions and blogs and posts that you will see in a variety of formats, but most notably in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and other outlets such as The Economist and Nature and Science. But at the Census Bureau, she leads a high-profile initiative to integrate the Census Bureau's major frames and co-leads a 2020 administrative records census project. And so all of that really says that data is like her best friend, and being able to interrogate data in a way that tells the story, that tells us not only of what has happened, but is a forward-looking as well. So Misty, so excited to have you here today. It's our honor to have you be part of our LEAD Summit this year. Misty, you know, I read several of your blogs, and why don't we just step in and just share a little bit, if you will, about COVID and how in your blog that was titled COVID-19 Gave My Career Mild Depression. Can you start by sharing a little bit about your story?
Sure, I'd love to. So, you know, if you think back about a year ago, you know, none of us really knew what we were in for. I had been on sabbatical or on leave from the Census Bureau last year during the academic year, so September through May. And I had gone to the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis as a visiting scholar to do some research on poverty, women, household composition. And I have a spouse and two kids, and my spouse works in DC at the Federal Reserve. And so I had been commuting. My kids stayed in the DC area with my spouse, and I had been commuting back and forth. Every other weekend, I would take a long weekend and come back to Maryland or to the DC area to be with my family. So when COVID hit, you know, we were all kind of shutting down. The travel was shutting down at the bank. And so I had requested to telework for 1 month from Maryland, because of course, after 1 month, all of this COVID nonsense would be over. And that leave was approved. So I came back to DC on, I think it was March 12th, and was planning on hunkering down here and working from home for a month. And what basically happened was, you know, I had been since September kind of had my weeks just to myself. And anyone who is a working parent knows that it is a fine craft to be able to balance your work with running your household and your children. And so I had this experience where I was extremely productive during the week in my work life, because a lot of the informal, unpaid labor work that I do around the house with my kids and pets and spouse and all of the other things I have in my house that I take care of had basically kind of shifted to my husband and my kids to be responsible for. And so when I unexpectedly was forced to kind of come back into my home early, it was really challenging for me to figure out how do I continue to move my research projects forward with all of the distractions at home. First my kids had a week of leave, and then they transitioned into virtual learning. And so helping them not only figure out how to set that up, but also all of their emotional needs around kind of this new reality. And it just became really hard for me. And part of that was, it was really hard for me to keep my work persona moving forward. And so, I encourage everybody to read my piece. I call it, COVID-19 gave my career mild depression, but what actually happened is that I got mild depression, diagnosed from my doctor. And I think part of that was I was so focused on taking care of everybody else. And my own kind of balance was totally in disarray. And that just, created a situation where I wasn't taking care of myself anymore, because I was trying to figure out how to help everybody else in my household. So I don't think my experience was uncommon at all. There's a lot of mental health issues going on generally with COVID. People that live alone, it runs the gamut. But I do think that it just demonstrates the importance of really paying attention to your own needs, and really, making sure that, especially as parents, it's really easy for us to go into mama bear mode and just want to solve everybody else's problems. And it can create some slippage, make it really easy for us to forget about kind of taking care of ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, in my own situation, so I've got, I'm a mom and I work, but I work from home. So I'm a consultant, so I work from home. But then suddenly my husband was working from home.
Also working from
My
home.
son was doing school from home. My older daughter, who was in college closed and was now doing college online from home. And my world was just me. It just completely changed. So you're right. You're put in those situations where things evolve suddenly. And I remember thinking, just like you said, this will be over with soon. As soon as we get through this, and it was very different. So when you kind of look at the impact of this, and you're right, women have a burden or a gift, if you will, that is about caregiving and bringing on the ability to keep everything balanced, or keep everything moving, or get everything done. And it's pretty overwhelming when you think about how doing all of those roles and still trying to keep your own personal identity, whether that's in your career or whatever you're focused on, when it changes. So can you talk a little bit about some of the data and that you saw as you started studying the research of the impacts of employment or unemployment, underemployment, et cetera, that was occurring with women through COVID?
Sure. Okay, so I'll start by saying, if you think about mothers in general, mothers of school-age children, which I think were uniquely hit during this pandemic, because mothers of school-age children generally have an experience where their children are out of the house during the day, at least for 6 hours. So mothers of school-age children, prior to COVID, about every 7 in 10 mothers was actively working, meaning they had a job and they were physically, or mentally present at their job, so they weren't on leave or anything like that. At the onset of COVID, so if you think back to like March and April, that went down to about 1 in 2 moms who were actively working. And so, there was a lot of moms who kind of left work, either, quit their job, went on leave to do daycare responsibilities in their household, etc. And so it really did have an impact on the experience of mothers as it relates to work. So, I did some research on the initial impact of the pandemic. Part of my kind of getting out of my own funk was to just really realized, I couldn't be the only one going through this. And so what does the data say, which is always kind of my mojo in my job. And so I did some research on the initial impact of the pandemic on parents and parental labor supply. So how are parents still able to work? And my research shows that in the initial stages, so think back again to like mid-March 2020, it was really moms who were impacted by the stay-at-home orders and school closures within the states. So it was really moms who took leave from work just to be at home with their kids when they transitioned either to not having school or virtual. Women were 3 times more likely to say that they were not working due to childcare issues compared to men. So, women were much more likely to be not working due to childcare. And, while there is evidence that men did increase non-paid household chores at the onset, so dads did increase their level of engagement in household chores, women really bore the brunt of it in terms of non-paid childcare and domestic work under COVID. So if you fast forward to today, there's still around 35% of moms of school-age children that are not actively working. So it's still below pre-pandemic times. I guess the one kind of silver lining in today's situation is that even though, we're not back to pre-pandemic levels, the gender gap between moms and dads in work has kind of all but been eliminated overall. And so, moms took a bigger hit at the front end, but they've caught back up to dads. And so you can think of a couple of reasons why that might be. Either, the economy has opened up so that some of the jobs where moms were disproportionately hit, they've been able to get them back. Moms are figuring out how to better balance work and taking care of, virtual school and things going on at home. The one caveat that I will say is that there's quite a bit of difference by race, ethnicity, and household composition in terms of moms and dads and getting back to work. The last piece that I'll just talk about briefly, I think, is just the unemployment rates. So unemployment rates for single mothers of school-age children today is double their non-single counterparts. So it's double what it is for moms who have other working age adults in the household. And it's also double their own unemployment rates from about a year ago. So there is a lot more vulnerability around being a single parent and trying to keep up with work and taking care of kids at home.
That when you think about it, it's just staggering the impacts. And you mentioned a single mom. So when you've got a single mom who's got a school-age kid who's also kind of strained from a financial capacity because of trying to keep the household going, and now having the responsibility of keeping the household going and being kind of that overseer of schoolwork and methodology, and then the impact from the economy of whether or not the job that she may have either stays the same, has different hours, or adjusts. It's a tremendous amount of pressure and stress on top of just making it, right? And so when, I think about the differences between men and women, certainly men are carrying a burden as well. But when the economy pieces start adding into it, so financial stability and the ability to kind of move through all of the things that have to happen to keep life going for your family, it's pretty staggering just what a year can do. So when you talk about the leveling out, if you will, of the pay inequity, do you see that because there are more women going back to work now, or are you seeing that there are less of a return to work or full employment levels for men? What do you see as some of the contributors for that?
Well, so I think one piece that's really important contextually is what what is the level of quality of the jobs that moms are returning to? And so that's still the unknown question, and that's the next piece of my research, which I will be working on over the next couple of months. So while it's true that moms have kind of caught up to dads in terms of their engagement with active, paid work, there's a big question about whether moms have gone back part-time instead of full-time, whether moms have gone back to jobs that don't pay as well, or to jobs that aren't as kind of stimulating or engaging for them. And so I think there's still a lot of questions. We all need money to pay for rent and to pay for food and clothing and all of the other essentials. So I think a question needs to be asked in terms of, are moms, going back to work now, leveling off to the rates of dads, because there's a serious need in their household for money to pay rent. And so they're perhaps going back to jobs that aren't exactly as high quality or as high pay as they had before, or is something else going on? And so, that's a question still that we don't have answers to yet, but that's kind of the next stage where I think we need to focus our energy in order to understand really what's going on with moms and their ability to work through the end of this pandemic and then post-pandemic.
And so one of the things that you mentioned is about the mental health for women and how this is impacting that both for yourself, directly, but then there was some really interesting research you did around the impacts of the states that had early shutdown and not, and how that either contributed to or prevented some of that impact. Can you share a little bit of that? It's fascinating.
Sure. So that was the research that I did at the very kind of onset of the pandemic. And again, this was kind of my way of gaining back control of my own personal identity in my workspace. It was one of the few activities that I could do where I could override the distractions of, kids coming in because, they couldn't find the purple sock to match the blue sock, or whatever the distraction might be, or the other purple sock to match their one purple sock. And so that research really, what I did was I looked at states that closed early, states that had stay-at-home orders and school closures early compared to states that had stay-at-home and school closures late or not at all. And basically what I found, which I think is very interesting. So, I think a lot of times we believe as a society that we've come a long way in terms of gender equality, that we've, broken through a lot of glass ceilings and a lot of barriers, but I think one question that's very, very important is if we're put in a situation, an unexpected situation that happens to be very stressful, what happens to us? And I think what my research shows is that we kind of revert into these very traditional gendered norms. And so what my research shows is that in states that did have stay-at-home orders and school closures early on, that it was really women who picked up the slack for their kids not having a safe, productive space to be in every day. And so it was basically moms took leave. It was around 67 to 68% more likely to take leave in early closure states than moms in late closure states. When I look at dads, there was no difference in take up of leave. And I'll just say that this makes sense for moms. So I think a lot of moms can relate to this idea that when your kid has a dentist appointment or has to get their wellness check, a lot of times it's moms who will take leave and take their kids to those activities, or even schedule those activities. Moms end up, I think, kind of taking up a lot of this slack in this space, and it's a lot more culturally acceptable for moms to take leave from work because of family duties. I think men really struggle feeling comfortable saying, hey, I have to take leave because I have to take care of my kid. So what happened with dads at the onset of the pandemic is there was no difference in leave for dads, leave take up in between early closure states compared to late closure states. I did find that dad reduced their hours worked in early closure states by the equivalent of less than 1 hour for a 40-hour work week. So basically, you had moms taking a week of leave, and you had dads taking less than, working less than 1 hour less a week to kind of compensate for the kids being back in the house. So, I mean, I think this, again, I think we revert to traditional gender norms. I think that there is a big issue of, traditional gender norms in our unpaid household work that we do. And I think, if anything, the pandemic gives us a good opportunity to start having those discussions, seriously. One of the problems of women disproportionately leaning out of paid labor to do unpaid labor in their household is that we miss out on opportunities for advancement. And that means we miss out on opportunities for increased pay, both today and in the future. And that contributes directly to the gendered wage gap that everybody talks about all the time. And so I think it's not only an issue of the formal outside of the house inequalities, but I think we also need to start tackling some of these inequalities in our households if we're ever going to really achieve gender equality.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned in your research the double bind of mothers, and I think you've talked a little bit about it, but for our group, I think just the concept is really important to get our head wrapped around. Can you share a little bit about what that is and what that means for moms in particular?
Yeah, so, I mean, it is really, it really comes down to kind of your work life and your family life. And, the double bind is that you're basically trying to be as successful as you can in both areas. And that really creates a somewhat impossible situation. Unless you have support in one space, you can pay somebody to, do childcare or make the meals or whatever it might be. Lots of us don't have kind of the luxury to do that. And so moms are really in this double bind because, society is not very good at recognizing all of our unpaid work that we do in the household as actual work. And so that puts us at a disadvantage. It makes it hard for us to, engage at the level that men do in work. And it just really creates this double bind for us.
What is the saying that it's not that you can't have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time.
Right.
Right? And so, it really becomes the concept of work-life balance is not truly balance. It's about give and take and making those decisions in a way that works for your family, that works for your career. But you have to decide what is going to give, because it's really not equal. You have to say, for today, I'm going to be more focused in this space, and therefore this one's going to get less of my attention. And that is it's a real struggle for women going through the process.
And I think this is, I'm extremely hesitant to say that anybody bears the blame in this type of situation. Even in my own situation. So there's lots of factors that influence. In my own situation, when I think about my relationship with my kids and my spouse's relationship with my kids, for whatever reason, and I would do anything to equalize this, but the fact of the matter is that when my kids are having emotional needs that need to be met, they are drawn to me more than they are drawn to dad. And so, when my daughter is stressed because she needs to get a homework assignment done virtually and it feels too overwhelming for her, she will come to me and she will, want my help. And basically what that tends to be is I need to sit next to her physically, and then she continues to do the work and she gets it done, and I don't really contribute any intellectual support. I'm just physically sitting next to her, but emotionally that's really important for some reason for her to get it done. And for her, it's not, I don't know why, but it's not the same, that's she considers that to be a mom need. And so I think this is really it's a whole family conversation. This isn't an issue of dads aren't doing enough. This isn't an issue of, kids aren't equally moving, kids aren't equally have the same equal level of demands for mom, dad. This isn't just an issue of, mom, likes things to be done a certain way and nobody else can do it as good as she can, so she's just going to take it on. Like, it's all of those things. And it is literally, I think, a full family discussion about how do we want to be as a family? How do we want to progress as a family? I think moms that are stressed out need to say, this is a lot for me. I'm really stressed out. Where are the certain areas where, either I as a mother can be okay with letting somebody else do it who wouldn't do it how I would do it and just being okay with that? Or where are the areas where I can push my children more to say, listen, if you're having struggles with homework, on Mondays you can come to me, but on Tuesdays you need to go to dad. So this isn't about placing blame on anybody, but it is about opening our eyes. I think if the pandemic has been horrific in so many ways, but one thing that we can potentially do is just use it as an opportunity to open up our eyes about the way we're currently living our lives and what things we might think about doing differently to just have a better outcome in the long run.
The old adage that don't let perfect get in the way of better is something that I think we could all appreciate. And when you started talking about like moms just wanting to do it, okay, I know I can do it just as fast, or I can do it faster if I just do it myself. And you're right, sometimes we just have to step back and say it doesn't have to be done this way. And my family would tell you that we had a similar conversation about, how many times was the dishwasher run through the time when everyone was here at the house, right? Normally the dishwasher got run maybe every other day, and now it was daily. And then it was about putting the dishes away. And the conversation about helping put the dishes away went from, Mom, do you want help putting the dishes away, or do you want the dishes put away the way you want them put away? And I had to say, yes. I wanted both, but I had to recognize that it didn't have to be the way that I thought that they had to be done, right? And so I think to give us all a little bit of breather to say it doesn't have to be perfect, progress over perfection, and being willing to have those conversations, not only just as, partners in the household, the adult partners, but the whole family. Like, how does everybody contribute? And yes, you might like the cushy feely hugs that you get from mama, but dad's really awesome too. So let's lean on him a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So silver linings, that's one of the things that's really helped me not get so caught up in how overwhelming COVID could be. Right, is really looking for those moments of gratitude, looking for, the good memories that we wouldn't have ever made because we wouldn't have had to do this. But when you think about the journey for women, both in their career and as we try to move in the advancements for equality, what silver linings do you see that give us hope and say, wow, that's good that we have this now?
Well, I think one of the silver linings is kind of what I've already mentioned. At least for me, this was like a big eye opener in terms of how we live our domestic lives. And it was a big eye opener for me in terms of the ways in which women split their time between their domestic life and their work life, and how that might be contributing to some of the gender inequalities we see in the formal work sphere. So I think one silver lining is just that acknowledgement, and then kind of pushing ourselves to think differently about that and to work on the space within our homes to try to create a more gender equal space within the household in terms of unpaid work. I think the other silver lining for me is I've never had to work so hard at maintaining my own personal balance. And so, I literally do hour walks every day. It's one of the ways that I kind of recovered my mental health. And they have been so awesome. I do a lot of thinking in those walks. I listen to a lot of really awesome women who are, a lot of podcasts of moms and women. Brene Brown is one of them. I really enjoyed her podcast. And so I think that one of the silver linings for me is that this has really forced me to prioritize my own health and my own well-being within the context of all of the other names that I have, whether it's mom, coworker, supervisor, employee. I really, if I'm going to contribute in a healthy way to my family and to my colleagues at work, I really need to make sure that I'm taking care of my own mental health and that I'm taking care of my own well-being and doing at least one thing just for me that gives me pleasure and joy every single day. Because if I don't do that, I'm, really get out of balance. And so I think, that would be another silver lining for me, is just the clarity around the importance of taking care of ourselves.
So I think that's really great advice. And I guess for our participants that are part of our LEAD Summit, I'm going to really challenge and encourage everyone to think about that, to really put some action and thought around what are the 3 things that you want to do in now 2021 to make sure it's not 2020 that put yourself first. So what are you doing to increase your mental health capacity? So headspace, walking, nature. What couple of things can you do for yourself that will then enable you to be showing up better in your work life, your family life, your community life? And if we think about, ourself and our self-care and our self-love, it's not selfish for self-love. It's required. And,
Right.
and 2, our network. So how can we leverage our network, even if it's virtual, to feed us? Women love and need to have that connectedness with other people, and women in particular. So how are we focusing on our network? And then 3rd, how are we being an advocate for other women that are going through the same things that we are? How can we walk alongside and encourage that ability to focus on self-love, forgiveness and grace, release some control, whatever that might be? So I really want to encourage our participants to come up with a plan for you. And thank you for sharing that. And Missy, I just have to say thank you for taking your time to be with us and for the good work that you do. The research that you've done and the ways in which we can parlay that to equity in the future, I really encourage everyone to check out all of the great resources that you have on your website and to look you up. But again, I just want to thank you and thank all of the participants of the LEAD Summit, and we can't wait to hear your feedback.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my story and to talk with everyone.
It's been a pleasure.